Hey David, just wanted to give you a quick review of the steps for DPM and to get all that code to work and that configuration in place. I'll do this in maybe 2 or 3 videos to make them shorter, but I'll just do this really quick and then you can play back as needed. I'm on Portal's server console. I did do a few things to set this up. If you go to server settings, server defaults, site and appearance, you'll see that I've activated or I've remapped some secondary page types to specific secondary pages that support DPM. This is in the tech pubs, and I sent you an email with this information. So this is important, and you've got to do it for your DPM sites to work with the new, all the really fun modal and responsive stuff that's available now, drag and drop as well. So I've done that. Another thing I've done was I added 2 lines to properties.txt to take care of a bug, or kind of a bug. So this is KB there, and you just need to add these 2 lines. And what that does is it disables cross-site scripting prevention for the admin users or the business users. So it's kind of a bug. So it's not something you want to obviously talk about, but it has to be there for everything to work. Then once that's done, I need to create 2 grids, or excuse me, 1 grid. And the best way to create a grid is to use the inline responsive content publisher grid. So I'm going to click on that new inline responsive grid. And the reason we like this is because it supports drag and drop, modal capabilities, responsive design, and all sorts of fun things that are available now. I'm going to call it, and I'm going to call it RL grid, or RL default DPM grid. And I'll also change the programmatic name. So RL default DPM grid, voila. Then I'll click update. I'll go to the support files and I'll download the support files to my system. And I'm just going to go update those. I'm going to open containing folder and then open that code in Notepad++. And I'm going to scroll through this code and just get rid of anything I don't need. This grid is for Dynamic Portal and supports a responsive design and drag and drop and modal behaviors. But I'm going to get rid of things I don't really care about. I do want to keep all this stuff in, that's important. But I'm just going to pull out all the HTML and anything that we don't use in Portal. So for example, I'll just get rid of this. So anything that I don't need, and that's pretty much everything, I'm going to get rid of. So we're not using Portal navigation. We're using navigation coming from WEM. We're not using Portal breadcrumbs. We're using breadcrumbs coming from WEM. And anything else that we may not want to use. And we're going to add a few things as well. So I've made some really simple changes to the default grid. I've included 1 line that will need the page layout to support using the page layout. Otherwise, all of the presentation objects will be supported now. We have our in-context edit, our page layout. We have, and above here, we have our style sheet, our scripts that are used to support the inline editing, inline linking, and the region layouts and all that stuff. And then the theme. If we want to use a theme, we don't have to, but we should support it. I'm going to leave in everything else, all the Ajax stuff and JavaScript to support drag and drop. I'm going to leave in. So I just made a few small changes to that. And then I'll go ahead and save it, but I'm going to save it as a different file name. So I'm going to call it maybe RL default grid. And now I have a grid. Now I'm going to go back to my console and upload the new code. So I'm going to browse for the new code, RL default grid, and then apply the header to new primary file, which allows us to use the include file associated with the header type. And that's important for working with grids and styles and other things. And then I'll upload that code. So now I have an RL default DPM grid. It's associated with the code that's going to work for us. And then I need to create a theme. So I'm going to go to my themes, and I'm going to use a theme that supports all the things that I have in my grid, Amber Responsive Modal, for example. I'm going to duplicate it and give it a better name, like RL default theme, and then update. The associated style mapping I'm not going to change. We'll just use the default style mapping, and that works fine. Once I'm done with those two things, I'm going to create a site that uses those objects. So I'll go to my sites and I'll start my site creation wizard. And I'll create a template first. I'm going to do a RL template. And we'll just call it template, or maybe we'll do something like this, RL template. We're not going to create a site based on this. We're just going to use it as a template so that we can create mini sites really quickly. I'm going to create navigation, but these are not navigation that will be actually used. They will act as placeholders so we can render the WEM channels on these pages. I'll create a navigation item and page for channel for sub-channels, and anything else I might want to use, like a details view for products, for example. And we can use the friendly name. We don't have to use that hidden name, which actually doesn't even work anymore. We'll just use the regular name. It's going to get overridden anyway, so we don't really care. I do need to add a portlet. You have to have at least one CP portlet on your sites. So I'm going to add an instance of CP portlet that I've already created. The only reason this is needed is so that the WEM knows which sites support Dynamic Portal. That's how it determines if a site supports Dynamic Portal. I'll click Next Step, and then I'll associate my themes and so forth. So my RL default theme and my default grid, which is probably on the next page. There it is. So now I have my RL default theme, RL default grid. Now I can create the site. I can administer the site and go to the site console, and that's fine. I can try to view the site to see what would happen. Well, what I'm looking for is blank. I want to make sure I see blank. If you see errors or things crash, that means the grid is bad. So if you see blank, that's a good sign. It means there's no context, so it doesn't know what to do. Not yet, anyway. So once that's done, we just need to go create a template based upon that. We could go to the site itself and maybe make some changes. So for example, you can handle the secondary page mapping at the site level if you want. So for example, I can go to the server console, I can go to my secondary pages, and I can share any secondary pages that are typically used for supporting Dynamic Portal. And let me show you what those are. I'm going to scroll through this, and any secondary pages I want to use in my site, I'm going to go ahead and select them and share them. For example, all the Dynamic Portal secondary pages I need to support. Oh, there's a new one. So I need to add my sync components, my module sync, and my SSI components. Scroll through this. I do need to support logon, so I'm going to support logon. If I need to do anything else, like account controls or anything like that, I'll add those as well. So you'll scroll through this and just make sure that you can do all this stuff, right? So sign in, sign out, maybe we'll use that too. So we'll use sign in responsive, modal responsive to support the modal sign in. Otherwise, that should be enough. And then I'll share those items to my new site. There's my RL template. Cool. I can also create users here and associate them to the site to prevent issues, but you can use administrator. So now I'm going to switch to the site, and we should be in good shape now. So before I start using this, I need to create a template based on that site and then delete the site. So go back to the server console. I'm going to go to the site list, and I'm going to create a template based upon that new site. Oops. Now that I've got a template, I can go see if the template exists. I can rename the template if I want to. It seems fine though. Otherwise, once I have the template, I can just remove the site so no one accidentally uses it. So I'm going to get rid of that site. So now, whenever we need to create portal sites, we just run this template. And we can do that from preview, from in context edit, or from the admin console. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll go ahead and select my template and create a site. And then we'll give it a real name. So now it's created a site. I go back to the site list, and I'm going to modify the site name and call it something like, Ralph Lauren, right? And the site DNS name will be something like, Ralph. Who knows? We'll just use standard DNS name, right? And then I'll update that site. I'll go to configuration. Maybe I will allow administrators to have super user access and change the grid and theme. Maybe I'll use a custom console appearance as well and change the colors if I want. Do something, so we know we're in the site console. That's very convenient. I'm going to quickly change the colors to some, silly colors. Trail shadow line. So I'll just do some silly colors. I'll scroll through this and allow administrators to create users. I'll scroll through this and maybe allow them to create custom categories and access power user features and click update. And there we go. We can also add administrators if we have any users. So for example, I can add you as an administrator. So I can sign out, I can sign in as you, and make sure that the site works. And make sure that everything is okay. I'll go back to end user view. Oh, that's the site that's already there. Oops. Switch sites. Sign out. Now there's a trick when you're using two users. It's better to try to use two different browser windows. Otherwise, you get this kind of problem here. So it's a little tricky. So if that happens, you'll have to, unfortunately, you have to either clear the history or close the browser. So in this case, it's just something that happens when you're using two different users. I'm going to clear all the history and then log back in as admin. Then I can go to my Ralph Lauren site and make sure it looks okay. And it's blank, which is what we want.